Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves. I'm your host, Ike, and before you get too sucked into this awesome interview, do us both a favor and like, subscribe, and share this amazing piece of entertainment, because I'm here with the one, the only, BDM!
Hey everybody, that's about as good as an intro as I've gotten in a really long time, Ike, so I appreciate that.
I did it. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Been in this room for the last 2.5 years working. Pretty much.
Is that paradise or is that a paradox that you can't escape?
It's a little of both, right? It's been good. Been getting a lot of work done, building a lot of cool stuff, but also, I miss people. I like the world somehow. It'd be nice to see it again. So.
Right on. Well, next time you see somebody, what do you think your first dad joke will be that you tell them?
Oh, I'm going to screw this one up. I have a raunchy dad joke, but I'm not going to tell that one because, honestly. But which I've adapted to cryptid culture. So, but that's a whole other podcast, I would imagine. Basically, piece of rope goes into a bar.
Mm-hmm. As pieces of rope do.
Walks up, hops up on the stool, says, "Let me get a whiskey sour." Bartender says, "We don't serve your kind in here. Get the hell out. What are you doing? Get the hell out of here." String kind of slinks off, goes outside, starts twisting itself up and, creating all these kind of loops and pulling itself tight and undoing it and doing it again. And, finally contorts itself into a little wad of string and, walks in and says, "Let me get a whiskey sour." He's like, "Wait a minute. Aren't you that one I just threw out of here?" He says, "No, I'm afraid not."
That's great. Speaking of things that are great, do you have a favorite underutilized word?
I love the word festooned. I like it as a verb. Someone's playmat could be festooned with PTQ top 8 pins.
Oh, I remember that. You don't need to take me back to the year 2004. I remember the local end boss at in northern Nevada had his playmat was festooned from all the edges with PTQ playmat or PTQ buttons. It was great.
Who was the end boss in that area?
Northern Nevada was Kenny Ignacio.
Okay, I know that name.
Yeah, of course you do. You know everybody's name. He was a crusher, just always in the top 8, usually winning. Sometimes if he was unlucky, not, and
known to split up a slot for the product on occasion.
Yeah, perhaps perhaps a time or two. Also known to cause enough ire in a judge without saying anything particularly raucous to get kicked out of a top 8 Rochester draft for telling his opponents that they kept mispicking every time he took his card. I don't think I've ever seen, what was his name? I think he's the level 5 that works for WotC now. Huge judge, nearly 7 feet tall. He's from Vegas, and he was the L3 that would come up and do the tournaments. You've just never seen him so annoyed as when dealing with Kenny.
That's awesome.
Good times, bad times, fun times. Is there a movie that you'll never skip when channel surfing?
There's way too many of them, actually.
What's the most recent one, then?
Probably,
or what's your favorite, whichever comes to mind first?
It's a little both, right? So favorite is Miller's Crossing. I love Miller's Crossing. I think it is the best Coen Brothers movie. I think it's the best movie that came out the year it came out. I think it is one of the top 10 movies ever made. We'll watch it endlessly. And if it's on, no matter what point it's on from, I need to stop whatever I'm doing and watch it. And if I'm with someone, right, it's like, hey, sit down, we're watching this.
Do you do the John Turturro sit in the chair with your knees in your lap, just crane so your head can't be seen?
Yes. Yeah, no, I love that movie. But I would say my favorite movie to rewatch and to just from anywhere is RoboCop. First RoboCop, perfect movie.
RoboCop,
yeah, quotable movie, rewatchable movie. Fairly prescient movie.
Little too on top of things.
A little too on the nose, but just I love it.
All right, so you're hitting two nails on the head for me. I got to ask, what of the following two quotes, which is your two of these? Dead or alive, you're coming with me, or what's the rumpus?
What's the rumpus?
A little bit more usable.
Yes.
What would you say is your biggest everyday temptation, BDM?
Playing games instead of making games is the easy one. Mm-hmm. Basically, running a company, making games, and it'd be really easy to just like go down a Wordle arena, Slay the Spire, whatever game it is at the moment, web command, playing Commander over webcam. There's always the temptation to play games over everything else, and so it's one of the biggest struggles of transitioning to making games full time is that you don't always get to play them as much.
Yeah. Have you done this only online, or have you done game making in person as well prior to the pandemic?
So prior to the game we're working on right now, so we're working on a digital trading card game. It's actually funny, one of the, which is always a digital game, but one of the, I work on it with Zvi Moshowitz, among a number of other people whose names you're certainly familiar with, Corey Burkhart and Paulo Vitor Rosa. And, but, one of the first ones, Zvi and I, when it was, just a handful of us, we would meet every day in an office. And, our earliest efforts are involved, he and I just cutting cards out of a piece of paper with like, safety scissors and putting them in sleeves and, doing all this very complicated digital game mechanics and sort of tracking them on paper somehow. But there's a funny picture of me somewhere. I can even send it to you if you wanted it.
Sweet.
But it's like me just like cutting pieces of paper, and it's like, the high-tech world of digital trading card games.
So when you were working in person, did you find it easier, or was it just as hard to not just, slough off responsibility and start playing games?
No, it's funny. You would think that would be easier working from home, right? Because you have less accountability, but psychologically it's just way easier to justify, going out for a long lunch, or hey, let's just fire up the, let's check with how does that deck work? How the hell did Shota win any games with that at the Players Championship this past weekend? Let's and chalk it up as research, right? If you have, you have that sort of plausible deniability of a buddy, you could say it's research. So I find it's a little harder at home, actually, work from home, because you just feel like, you have to work a little harder to sort of like, you feel guilty.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. It's psychological. It's some weird form of, psychological warfare that's being conducted on us that makes us just, work harder and longer somehow, despite, every excuse not to.
Yeah. I wonder if it's one of those things that, like, when you go into the office, there's a separation, but when you're at home, you're always at the office and you're always at home.
Absolutely.
So it's got that kind of paradigm.
Yeah, and you spend so much of your time in front of your devices, and, it's like you have Slack, Skype, Teams, 8 million different phone messengers, and so it's really easy to just get pulled into something pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You know, and you also just don't have that sense of people's boundaries, right? Like if you're in an office, you know, you see when someone's doing something else, right? And you kind of just know, oh, I won't bother them now. But you know, now you just like you fire off a Slack message, and you're like, oh, a Slack message, okay, let me see what that is, and you know, and you just it's just very there's less personal boundaries somehow in the work from home environment.
I think it has to do with the sweatpants.
Yeah.
So growing up, did you have a favorite book?
So like growing up, like 4 years old, growing up like 14 years old.
What looking back, what is your, whichever time period you prefer, just of, you know, pre-graduating high school, was there a book that stands out as being, you know, having that biggest of nostalgia pangs?
Sure, I think there's two answers here, and they both sort of converge. The first is Dead Zone by Stephen King. And almost any Stephen King book, but not necessarily like I found the books to be even at that, even when I was, you know, early teenager, to be slightly uneven at times. But what I loved about them was that Stephen King would write these pretty detailed introductions to his books, and would talk to his readers about the process of writing and about creating and about caring about things, right? Like he really talked about the things he was passionate about, and it was really resonant to me. Right, you know, again, just making you aware of that process of writing made me seek out books about writing, made me seek out books about creation. Same thing with, I would say before that, you know, there was like this trade paperback collection from Marvel Comics of called Marvel Origins. There were 4 of them: Marvel Origins, Son of Origins, Bring on the Bad Guys, and the Origins of the Superhero Women. I still have the books right here, so I'm just like looking. You know, maybe it was just called The Superhero Women was the 4th one. And they were the first appearances of like pretty iconic Marvel characters, some less iconic Marvel characters in some cases, but reprinting their stories, their origin stories, at a time, you know, when stuff wasn't readily accessible, right? Like you couldn't just fire up some app and have every comic ever printed, you know, at your fingertips, like you can now. But again, the same thing. What was really amazing to me is that there were these interstitials written by Stan Lee, where he would, again, just talk about that creative process, right? He would talk about this like Marvel bullpen and all these like characters, and I mean like real world characters who populated it, and would tell the stories, and, you know, and would talk about like the choice of getting an artist onto the book, and, you know, the design process and the inspiration for that design. And it really was one of the key things that sent me down the road of wanting to be a comic book creator, right? Like, because it made me aware at a very young age that, you know, you always know that people make these things, right? But like giving you those really personal stories, you know, when you're probably like 10 years old or something, was really eye-opening for me. And I got a chance to meet Stan Lee before he died.
Sweet.
At a con in LA. I don't know, it's got to be like 7 or 8 years ago now. And it was, and, you know, and everyone always, I'm sure, says, oh, you know, Spider-Man or the Fantastic Four. And I was like, listen, I got to tell you, the interstitial chapters you wrote in Origins, Son of Origins, etc., were really life-changing for me. They made me want to get into comics. It's one of the reasons I'm here today, is because you wrote those words. Not just the characters you created, obviously super important, but talking about that creative process.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
And he looked at me, and he shook his head, and he's like, and I don't know what your profanity level here is on the podcast, but he's
no,
fucking Simon and Schuster. They should keep those fucking books in print. Excelsior, people.
I love the third title, Bring on the Bad Guys. It's such a great title.
Oh my god, yeah. I loved it. It might even be the first one I owned out of the set. But all just like super iconic books for me from childhood.
Putting them in my Amazon gift basket to myself right about now.
Nice.
All right, so if you had to evacuate your house, what's the first possession you'd grab and rescue to safety? We're assuming that all loved ones and sentient creatures can get out, including fish somehow. Let's say the fish can.
Sure.
It's a flood and they can swim. Who cares?
Sure. It would probably be a box of original comic book artwork that I've collected over the years. And assuming somehow I can instantly transport all the stuff that I have hung up on the walls into that box as well.
What is your favorite, or what is your first piece of original comic book art?
It's I have a weird collection of stuff, but I do have a couple of things from projects that I worked on over the years. I would say my favorite piece is I did a book for Marvel Comics in the early 2000s called The Craptacular B-Sides, which was characters I created, and have now, sold to Marvel in the grand work for hire tradition. But that's fine. I knew what I was getting into when I did it. It was kind of like a bucket list item.
Yeah, totally.
And a really good friend of mine, Evan Dorkin, who's a pretty famous cartoonist, wasn't able to do the book with me, but did agree to help design the characters with me. And so he brought his really, unique kind of punk aesthetic to the process. These are like these really kind of ne'er-do-well, aspiring superhero teenage characters who are just kind of like disaffected suburban teens, which is kind of his sweet spot as a cartoonist. And he helped design the characters. And then when the book came out, he was really kind enough to give me this front plate he had done for the first issue of the book, the original art with the 3 characters, and a nice note. I have that hanging on behind the wall behind me.
That's so cool. It's so awesome when you're able to, make something and like keep a keepsake from it that's not, especially like when it gets like fully created, to like remember that, you did this, or like that, like you had a hand in something that is out in the universe. It's so sweet. Do me a favor, clear your mind.
Yes.
Now, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I say underrated?
Wow. That's like my whole shtick. I think everything's underrated.
What's the first thing that popped into mind when I said underrated?
The Incredible Hulk movie with Edward Norton.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to keep it in comic books, but I guess that's where my brain was.
No.
But I think that movie's really underrated. Louis Leterrier directed it. He's directing Fast and Furious 10, so I've also been thinking about it. A little bit. Looking forward to Fast and Furious 10. But I think that some of the fight scenes in that movie really set the stage for kind of what we see today, right? Like I think people were just, I don't understand why the movie wasn't a bigger deal. I can understand it being less of a big deal now, but at the time that it came out, there's some pretty remarkable stuff in that movie. And I think it is better than people think it is.
Yeah. I remember seeing that movie in a comic book.
Solidly middle of the pack of the MCU movies, and not solidly bottom of the pack where most people have it.
Yeah. I remember seeing that for the first time when I was a kid in like a games store, like the local game store where I was growing up, and like being wowed at the fight choreography. Like also just seeing Tim Roth like jump, hurdle, and vault over all that stuff when he was like fighting the Hulk early on in the film before he gets juiced up is such a great showing of like agility can beat furious strengths ish. If there was a weak point in Hulk, like maybe Tim Roth wins, but it turns out there's not, so get screwed. But yeah, that movie is definitely underrated. It's also I like Mark Ruffalo, but seeing Ed Norton kind of get to have his take on that was a lot of fun too, because he's such a great actor.
Random Edward Norton thing that I found out, or a random Edward Norton adjacent thing. So Edward Norton becomes famous for the movie Primal Fear, right? It's like the first movie anyone really remembers him in, and so I was like, oh, I know that's based on a book. I mean, the movie was on. It's one of those movies that I'll just always watch if it's on, and I'm watching. I'm like, oh, I've never really. I think that's the same guy who wrote Sharky's Machine. Let me see. Oh, it is. Okay. And I'm like, and then there's like Primal Fear **, another book **, another book * in the author's bibliography. And I'm like, that's weird. What is the **? So I look down. The 3 * books are the series of novels that involve Richard Gere's character and Edward Norton's character. That's that movie is just the first chapter.
Oh, wild.
The story continues for 2 more novels, which are in my Amazon gift basket to myself right now. But, I was like, well, how do you not go back and make those movies? Like, that movie's beloved. It's got an insane cast. Mm-hmm. Like, how does that not happen? Yeah.
The insane thing also, looking back, I'm just checking out his videography, is that it technically is his second movie, although a lot of people say it's his first. I don't know if the other one was like some kind of weird direct to kind of dealy, but he starts off so strong. Just looking back at Ed Norton's career, he starts on Primal Fear. 2 films later, it's The People versus Larry Flynt, followed by American History X, followed by Rounders. A movie later, it's Fight Club. Like, jeez, what? What kind of start is that? It's so insane. But yeah, just that movie. I remember I kind of somewhere between spoiled it and got to, get to the good bit. I remember like flicking through TV the first time I saw Primal Fear, just to that scene where his alter ego comes out. Well, truly his real ego comes out the first time, and it's just like, wow, this guy's amazing. And then watching the rest of the movie being like, wow, this movie's amazing. It's so crazy.
Yeah, it's an early Frances McDormand too. I mean, she'd been in all the Coen Brothers movies to that point. But I think it's
right, yeah.
She has like a really strong character turn in there I think she's, I want to say a mental health professional. Mm-hmm. But
also got
great guy. Laura Linney before
Laura
anyone.
Linney, Richard Gere, John Mahoney. Yeah. Oh, you got Adrian Brower well before Brooklyn Nine-Nine too. Yeah. Ontario Quinn before what was it, Lost? Wow. Yeah. There's a lot of sleeper hits on here.
Let's be fair. Andre Brower has Homicide: Life on the Streets before that.
True. Yeah.
And
he's not
Quinn
just a one note. He's not just
was the stepfather.
Yeah.
Which is another movie that I will always watch if it's on. And possibly answers the underrated question as well.
Yeah. Truly.
So, anyway.
What's your favorite industry secret or term that's only used in your line of work? I know you wear many hats, so feel free to pick whichever line of work you would like to kind of go down on there, but whichever one.
BWS. It is a comic book term. Mm-hmm. Probably doesn't really apply that much anymore. It's kind of like probably an out-of-date term because so much stuff is done digitally. Mm-hmm. But what would happen is when people would draw a comic page, they would pencil it, then it would get lettered, and then someone would get sent to an inker, and an inker would sort of set all the lines in ink. And oftentimes the penciler would leave some stuff for the inker, such as a dark night sky. Mm-hmm. And what they would often, and so what would happen is you'd have a character drawn in the foreground, and then the background would all be BWS, which stood for Black with Stars.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so then the inker would go in and kind of like put some black ink down, and then probably what they would do is dip a toothbrush in some white ink, and then they would take their thumb and kind of spray across the bristles of the toothbrush to get the star pattern.
Yeah.
And but yeah, BWS.
Is there a inverse of that with like white with birds? Is there like WWB or?
No, but I'll work it into a script this week for sure.
Because I mean, like, it's always black with stars. It's never black by itself because that's just like, you know, too much, somewhere in between too much ink and just like doesn't have that kind of je ne sais quoi that you really want. And
yeah, good, right. And at that point, you might drop that on the colorist, right? You might go with like a, you know, but yeah, black with stars.
Yeah, that's so cool. Is there a piece of advice you've been told over the years that has made the biggest impact on you, or that you find yourself pondering even to this day?
Shut up.
Okay, but like, what's your answer to the question?
No, you know, early on, I was working with someone who basically pointed out to me that I kept talking to fill silence, and that that was, you know, A, driving them crazy, but also B, just not giving me an opportunity to let other people occasionally contribute to filling the silence. And so I you know, it's less shut up and more like listen and be present, but not as, you know, that's not as pithy, so I didn't go with it. But yeah, just like the idea of just giving people an opportunity to respond and to listen to people and to not have to react immediately, to let people just share their thoughts and their ideas fully and not just like jump on top of it.
Totally. Yeah, you may or may not be the third or fourth guest that say that. I probably should have picked up that life lesson and inserted it in the old catalog. Definitely one that is underutilized by myself and many other people I know. I wonder if it has to do with the idea of somewhere between gamesmanship and the, like, you know how like if you basically you like when you stop talking you pass priority, almost like for the Magic audience out there, and so you're giving your what we consider our opponent, but in reality is another person in our society, the opportunity to kind of run with the ball, and it's kind of hard to pick up the ball if you let go of it, which is why I find myself in conversations and many other people saying like, and is to like retain the metaphorical talking stick, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely, and I, you know, it's definitely a struggle. It's not something that's easy to do. It's not, you know, we are all the stars of our own, you know, one person show.
Yeah.
But you know, it's you know, I try to remind myself that, you know, other people are also in a one person show and that sometimes we collide and share a stage.
That's such a great way of putting it. Given the opportunity, what is your favorite personal anecdote to tell?
Let's see. I have a few that I will go to. I've already told my Stan Lee, so that's a good one.
That is a great one.
Let's see. Let me think for a second about, you know, again, thinking about, you know, a PG-13 also kind of rating, which I try to bring to all recorded appearances. So, I mean, I guess, you know, I talked about some of the comic book work I had done, but I think the idea that I had an entire career in comics before I got into gaming, and when I first started working, I was in high school. I started working for a comic book company in Brooklyn, and you know, it was one of those things where, you know, people talk about like visualizing stuff and, you know, making your reality and all those kind of like self-help books about, you know, like, you know, if you say it, it will it into existence. But I was like, I want to get into comics, right? And this is a few years after reading Origins, Son of Origins, and I decided I wanted to make comics. And so I, you know, was like, I'm going to go get a job at a comic store. At that comic store, I'm going to meet somebody in the industry. and then I'm going to offer to I'll be an intern, right? I'll work for free. I'll work after school. I'll do whatever, right? I just want to get my foot in the door. Once I get my foot in the door, I know that comic creators are unreliable. And somebody will screw up a deadline. And I will be willing to jump in and sell a script. Right? And this all happened, by the way, exactly as I laid it out. And I don't know if I'm like 15 years old.
Wow.
I don't know that anybody knew how young I was. At the company. I wasn't getting paid. Right? I was just showing up and writing letters and doing stuff. And so I ended up selling my first script, and it was supposed to be drawn by George Perez, but he also screwed up. He also had a deadline conflict, as well as the writer who was originally supposed to write it. And got Rich Buckler, which was amazing. Gorgeous, gorgeous artwork. Wallywood's Thunder Agents #3 is the name of the book, and so I got a story published there. But one of my jobs was running the slush pile, and so the slush pile is just like people send in submissions, right? And again, no email, no electronic communications of any type. This is the 1980s. And so, it's like a stack of envelopes, and you open them up, and you look, and there's some Xeroxes, or some script pages, or something, and, my job was to sort of basically say, thanks, but no thanks, we appreciate you, sharing this with us, but, we're not looking for this at whatever time. I get one envelope, and I'm like, I know that name. Why do I know that name? That can't be the same person. Jerry Siegel. Is this related to the guy who wrote Superman, who created Superman? And I'm reading it. No, it's Jerry Siegel. And he's just writing letters to comic book companies trying to sell a goddamn comic book series.
Jeez.
And I'm like, holy shit, this is huge. This is my moment. Right? I'm gonna just, and I put together a presentation. I might have used Oak Tag. I don't know, but, and said, because again, no PowerPoint, and just said hey, listen, we've got a proposal here from Jerry Siegel. I've already written him back and told him how excited we are. Probably shouldn't have done that, but, and the guy who was running the company, this guy Dave Singer, was just like, no, Jerry Siegel's old. That's old stuff. The story reads old.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's okay though. We make it retro, right? We just lean into that, right? We make it look golden age. We don't try to sell it. And he's like, nah, I don't think so. I'm not interested in this. I'm only interested in new people, the hot new artists. He was only interested in the George Perez's and the Dave Cockrams, and I'm like that. But we could probably get those people to draw this story, right? They will be so excited about the creator, and he's like, no, they won't. Just trust me. And so then I had to write a follow-up letter to Jerry Siegel and just say I am so sorry, and he was wrote me back and just was like, yep, kind of what I've come to expect at this point. And I appreciate, that you loved my work and care about what, and he was really just super gracious, but it was heartbreaking. And really kind of shifted me from wanting to work in the comic book industry to wanting to have my own business in the comic book industry, where I would have some more. I wasn't sort of as
you were not cog, you were the driver.
Yeah, and then would eventually a couple of years later lead me to form my own comic book company.
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad that has that I was really worried that was going to end there. I wrote him back and he was grateful, but part of me died inside. The end. It's you need to end this a little happier. The story sucks.
Yeah, no, it's not a great story, but it does tell, I like that it illustrates where people were about comics at the time, that there wasn't this there wasn't that same appreciation of the history and I don't know. It was just a really weird time and place in the comic book industry.
But I mean, without that moment, as like kind of disheartening as it is, we might not get. Sorry, I don't know the name of your company, but we might not get BDM Comics. You might still be working there. You might still be kind of doing others' bidding in like a sort of way.
Right.
Like without this moment, you are potentially and most likely not who you are today, good, bad, or otherwise.
Sure.
So just like it is, and like also you got to talk to a legend and somebody that via paper discourse, but still. It's so that's so destructively beautiful. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a wild time. It was a wild time. I also got chased by Steve Ditko with a chicken leg at this point in my comic career.
All right, no. We're doing it. We're doing a double feature. How does that happen?
So Steve Ditko was pretty libertarian before that was even like a trendy word. He was just like this really weird, very, very individual guy. He did not sign anything. He did not like to have his photograph taken. And was just really peculiar. And for some reason, he had done some work for the first issue of Thunder Agents, which all happened before I came on board with the company. But at the party for the first issue, which I was at, he attended, which was bizarre, right? Like, not something he would normally do, but people were really excited. It's like, oh, there's Steve Ditko. Oh my God. And I was basically given some 35 millimeter camera and like, hey, take pictures of who's here, document this. And I tried to take a picture of Steve Ditko. And he
were you not knowing at the time, or were
not
you knowing?
Nope, not knowing. And he grabbed a chicken leg and started chasing me until he cornered me, got the camera, opened it up, and exposed the film because he doesn't like to have his picture taken.
Wow, that's so. Just picks it up like a cudgel and starts chasing you like a cave troll. Fantastic.
Yeah. Very nice guy though. Other than that, he was actually very pleasant to me in all my other
Just
interactions.
don't get him around the Pollo and you'll be fine. All right, BDM, what is your favorite little known fact?
So, the spitball was outlawed as a pitch in baseball, and I think around 1920, I want to say.
Yep.
But players were grandfathered in. Players who relied on the spitball were allowed to throw the spitball for the remainder of their careers.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until 1934 when Burley Grimes retired. So Burley Grimes threw the last legal spitball in 1934.
That's so cool.
And to tie it all back into comics and to keep everything, the reason I know that story is because of a book of little-known baseball facts that I had when I was a kid that was written by the sister of the person who invented the direct market of comics.
Oh, that's so rad.
Yeah, Barbara Suling. And it was Phil Suling is the sort of founder, the forefather of the modern comic book store. Anyway, so
that's so cool. All right, fill in the blank for me. This weekend was so great. I spent 13 hours
shopping used bookstores and yard sales.
I understand what we're looking for in used bookstores, most likely. I'm assuming books and comics. Yeah. But what are we looking for when we're going to yard sales? Same thing, or is there other accoutrements?
Certainly looking for books. It's pretty hard, my tastes tend to run, counter to the bestseller lists. So, you're not going to find a lot of stuff at yard sales. I've found some pretty cool things over the years. Some pretty cool science fiction first printing paperback originals and other things, but you don't find that much. Generally at yard sales, I'm looking for glassware. I enjoy having a variety of interesting looking glasses on hand. I enjoy making cocktails. I enjoy photographing cocktails. And so I'm always on the lookout for a really cool coupe or highball or Tom Collins glass or,
that's right.
you know, yeah.
You ever picked up any Magic cards or cards of any other game at a yard sale?
I've picked up some Magic cards, nothing crazy. Have definitely picked up Pokemon cards years and years ago. When I had a game store and was just like, oh yeah, I'll just grab those and we'll throw those in the, in the bulk box. But, not too much. You don't see them. You got to get up really early if you're going to catch that stuff. Cause there's people who just go to every yard sale and they have the hot list, they know what to, and they're always looking for Magic cards or comic books or, all the stuff that might be worth a lot that they can just pick up for, they'll just buy it. They'll just buy it in bulk. And so, but yeah, glassware.
Can you think of the first or most impactful memory when you realized you weren't so alone in a struggle of yours, or were more like everybody else than you previously realized?
Sure. It's going to go back to comics again. But I think this is something that's pretty universal for a lot of people who have been in, with game stores or comic stores. But for me, growing up in Brooklyn, growing up in kind of like right on the outskirts of Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. So like if you've ever seen like, I don't know, any movies about Brooklyn, you get an idea. It can be a little bit of a meathead culture at times. And as someone who grew up, and was really attracted to like punk and new wave stuff or comic books and science fiction and hard-boiled crime novels, right? Like I did not have a lot in common with the people I grew up with. Like the people in my neighborhood. I just didn't, and we would bond on sports and we would bond on various other things, right? We would find some way, but it was like we were friends through proximity. And, and part of that, journey of where I talked about that idea, I was like, oh, I'm going to go out and get a job in comics, right? And the way I'm going to do that is by working in a comic store. And I got to tell you that the first time I walked through the door of a comic store, like a real dedicated place that sold comics, it was pretty life-changing because there were other people suddenly wwho cared about the things I cared about.
Yeah.
They
found your
about,
people.
I found my people, right? And it's the same thing I think was people, Steve Sadin is someone I'm really close with, and he'll describe that same experience, decades later when he came into Neutral Ground for the first time as a 12-year-old. Right. He'll talk about that idea of like, oh my God, people are just here playing games all day and they're talking about how, they're talking about plays and they're breaking them down and they're, talking about what line they could have taken. He's like, I am never going to leave. And he didn't. For me, walking through into a comic store was like going through the wardrobe into Narnia.
Yeah.
Right. It was just like this absolutely transformative thing. I've met friends that are still my friends to this day, and not because we lived on the same block, but because we convened at the same spot that shared our interests. And that's many, many, many decades ago at this point. And it was just remarkable. And there's like degrees of that over the years as you find a better comic store with even, better sort of curation of people, or a better game store with more talented players, but that first time walking through, like there's still people that were there the day I walked into that store who are still present in my life, in a really meaningful way, people that I love. So, I think that's my answer.
That's so pure. That's so beautiful, man. I know the exact same feeling too, of like going into a game store when I was finally allowed when I was a kid. And it's just like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Right. And I mean, and the thing about those places is they are often pretty meritocratic, especially in a game store, right? Like,
Yeah.
The game store, you'd be like, yeah, you're 12 or 13 years old, but you know how to build a sealed deck. And, suddenly people who are 10 years older than you are like, did I build this right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I always have loved that utter flattening of like all the social norms around,
age doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's so great. I remember testing for PT Minneapolis. We were doing teams, and I was having this annoyed moment with the great Nathan Stewart. This is like 4 years ago or whatever, so he's very much still in high school. And taking a break and just like kind of getting outside of the moment and just talking with one of my teammates who were testing with him. He goes like, he's going to be the next Finkel. You know that, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, so shut the fuck up and listen to him. It's like, okay, that's fair. Got back in there. I was like, yeah, he's totally right. And it's like, this kid is so far above the rim right now. It's just annoying. It's like what the problem was. It's like, why? I think it was just looking back like, I'm so much older than you. And just like getting outside that moment of like the way our society gears us of age equals greatness or equals knowledge. It's like, yeah, that's just not true.
Right.
And getting to like fully experience that and just like learn from somebody who I had a decade on, like really just soak up so much value. And it's like, oh yeah, it's so great.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think that anyone who's found, a record store, a game store, bookstore, comic store, right, like yarn store, right, like anything where you just find that place where people share your passion, right? I think that, a movie like Empire Records hits that really, really well for me. That experience of like having this community, people you work with, you don't always get along with, but you're sort of, in it together, and you share these same passions or I think it's called, is it the movie? Is it called The Way Back? It's like about, it takes place like partially in people working in like a water park or something, but it's that same thing of just finding these people who are just like, misfits and outsiders like you are.
Totally.
And realizing that label actually doesn't fit,
Yeah. Yeah. Finding your home and not being an outsider anymore is, it's if you haven't found it yet, find it, kids. It's the best. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
Is there a moment, BDM, that you look back on in your life that fills your chest with pride or brings a tear of joy to your eye?
So, my very first memories are of so for all my talk about comics, all my talk about games, right? I love the New York Mets. I love the Mets. I grew up. It is this thing that really bonded me to my dad and to my brother. Neither of whom are here anymore. And we had season tickets for a long time and would go to games together, and it's just a huge part of my daily ritual, right? Like just checking on the Mets, seeing what's going on, when's the game, who's pitching, and last year, through some fortunate confluence of events at work, I got to throw out the first pitch at a Mets game at Citi Field. I got a whole suite, like a like one of those luxury boxes.
Yeah.
I got a whole suite to take my friends and coworkers with me.
Yeah.
And I threw a first pitch, and it was caught by someone who I've known now for a million years, and someone I work with, as V. Moshowitz. Normally, first pitches, they have a catcher, from the team, or a player from the team catch the first pitch. But because of COVID, they've moved away from that. So it's, you sort of bring your own
catcher.
Bring your own catcher. And so I brought V with me, who we still working together, and I got to wear a 1969 Tom Seaver jersey that I own, and walk out to the mound and see myself on the Jumbotron and hear my name and throw a pitch from near the mound. We weren't quite allowed on the mound. But that's fine. I was already pretty nervous about it. And I managed to hit the glove.
Nice.
Got a good job from some guy in the expensive seats. He's like, nice pitch, which was awesome,
Yeah.
And
that's so cool.
It's just a really and I understand how transactional it is, right? I understand that the guy from Benny's Lumber who takes up I understand how you end up getting to throw a first pitch, right? I get it. But it was amazing. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was a great day. It was a great game. The Mets won.
Hey.
Mookie Wilson came by our box and hung out with us for an hour or so.
Rad.
And was telling us, all sorts of like insider stories, about the thing. It was like, yep, I would have beaten the throw to first base even if Buckner had fielded it. Told us something like that he didn't know until that year that the reason Buckner was slightly out of position on that play is because there was supposed to be a pickoff play at second, and the pitcher missed the sign. So Buckner would have sidled over towards first base a little more had he thought there was actually going to be a pitch delivered to the plate. So it was just like an amazing. Yeah, there's a factoid for you.
That's sweet. Yeah.
It was just an amazing day. I don't know that I had a lot to do with it to be proud of, but I mean it really is just like it was a day that just made me super happy and was a childhood dream come true.
Yeah, totally. That's rad. Well, before we move on to the last question, I'm curious, how much, if at all, did you practice before doing that?
A lot. I found out about 2 days before it was going to happen that I had the opportunity. So I had a baseball. I had, because you don't always have, when's the last time I played baseball? You don't always have a hard ball around. I actually had a baseball. Weirdly, it was a baseball given to me by Trevor Williams, who's a major league pitcher who now pitches for the Mets. But at the time, he was a Pittsburgh Pirate, and I met him at Grand Prix Pittsburgh because he plays Magic.
Oh, cool.
And he recognized me and came up to me and started talking to me. And I was like, wait a minute. And someone's like, you know who that is, right? And I'm like, I'm putting it together.
He's wearing a jersey. His name's on it.
Trevor, and he's like, the Pirates were coming to Citi Field like that following week. And so he got me and a bunch of friends onto the field for batting practice and came out and signed some baseballs and he signed like some Magic cards for me. I think he signed a whatever that pirate is that feels like a faceless butcher.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Kite Self Rebooter, yeah.
Yeah, and a Kite Self Rebooter, but the other one, too. The one that's like the 2-3 blue, black, and 2. I don't remember the name now. But
okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so I had a baseball that he gave me as well, right? And so that was my only baseball. I'm like, well, I don't want to really fuck this baseball up, but I need to practice. And so I live in a townhouse. We have like an alley down the side of the house. And on one side is the brick of the house. And then it's about like, I would say 4 to 5 feet. And then there's like a, fiberglass fence separates from the next yard that's right there. So I'm like, this is perfect, right? It's like a corridor. It's going to force me to throw. And I can just, and I walked it off, measured out kind of the distance, and I'll just throw. And if I hit the gate, that's good, right? That's my goal, right? I don't want to bounce it. I didn't even care about hitting the target as much as not bouncing the pitch.
Yeah.
So I get in there, I'm like, all right, let me start doing this. And I want, warm up and, kind of like roll my shoulders and whatever it is, and, some isometrics. And I get in position and I throw the pit ball for the first time. And about like a foot away from my hand, it bounces off the brick of the building to my right and like I was like, oh my God, yes, I need to practice because I would have thrown it down the first base line or something, like, based on that trajectory. Yeah. So, so I practiced for like I don't know, like 3 or 4 hours a day for 2 days.
Nice. Worth it. That's awesome.
Yeah, totally. My arm was dead too. It was so funny. like by the time I got done, my arm was killing me. But it was absolutely amazing. And just that moment of walking out to the mound and then seeing myself up on the screen, and it was magical for me.
That's so cool.
You know, and just tied into so much emotion with my family and my brother, my dad, my grandfather, just it was you know, all that Field of Dreams shit, you know. It was pretty amazing.
That's cool. All right. Well, lastly, before we throw it to a commercial break, if you could have listeners of this podcast hear one song of your choosing, which would it be?
Ever Fallen in Love by the Buzzcocks. Just one of my favorite songs, like from 1977. Before it is before my time, but you know, a song that I loved in the 80s. It's covered by the Fine Young Cannibals, and has a completely different sound, which is actually, I think, maybe where I heard it first. But I just absolutely love it. It is one of my top 5 songs of all time.
Sweet. All right, and with that, we're going to throw it to our first break. Feel free to stick around and enjoy this totally real commercial, or take a minute to enjoy Ever Fallen in Love by Buzzcocks. Or if you really wanted to hear a song from a previous episode, check out the playlist on Spotify, Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast Song Rex. It's a long title, I know. Don't worry, there's a link in the description. Either way, see you in a jiffy. Have you ever wanted to kill a small woodland creature or break a window but not have the physical strength? I know I have. Now introducing Rock. Rock comes in a variation of sizes and ready to use. Simply put rock in your hand, raise it back to ear level, and release. See? You've got it! This ad does not condone the violence against small woodland creatures or windows, nor will it be held liable for any inability of use when coming into contact with paper. Welcome back, everybody. So, got BDM here. BDM, what is your passion that you brought with you today?
My passion, something that's really, I think anyone who follows me on Twitter or Facebook will see I'm just constantly posting pictures of food and drinks,
delicious
and
food,
things like that. Yeah, and I really I love cooking, but not just like, I'm not someone who enjoys following a recipe. I'm not opposed to it, right? Like if I have a very specific task ahead of me, like, you know, I need to make this thing for some event or something. But what I really enjoy is just taking a feeling or a memory or an inspiration and then just kind of piecing it together, right? And coming up with something that I really enjoy, right? Like, an example of this would be a sandwich I made, which was like, you know, I loved like an Elvis sandwich when I was growing up, right? There was a place we would go and we'd hang out after like a concert or, you know, whatever. And they would do like an Elvis, and it would be like peanut butter, banana, and bacon sandwich. And I always loved that. But, you know, I wanted to come up with, you know, like what would be my take on that now. And I did something where I did this like kind of like, you know, homemade peanut butter with like gochujang and cilantro and a little bit of fish sauce in it. Did these tostones instead of bananas, which are fried crushed plantains that were done in like a little nak cham dipping sauce, and you know, pork belly. And, you know, made that into like my version of like almost like a, you know, by way of Puerto Rico or Cuba, you know. So I just enjoy that kind of like playing with my food, right? I enjoy coming up with something that just touches on a memory, but then riffs off on and lets me just, you know, express myself creatively, right? It's kind of like the difference for Magic players between net decking and coming up with your own brew. You know? I'm a brewer in the kitchen.
When do you remember first trying this out? Like, was there a moment? Was there a reason? Like, what was the origin story, the impetus of this kind of passion of yours?
I've always liked cooking. Grew up, my grandmother was an Italian grandmother, And, you know, like these just memories of, you know, walking through the door into her house, which would open right into the kitchen, and the kitchen would just be, and this is a callback here, festooned with pots and bowls and, you know, and smells and flavor, and like, and she would just like, there'd be like gnocchi drying on a sheet on the bed, and there would be like sauce simmering away, and there'd be like braciole in the, you know, in a pan, and meatballs in another pan, and there'd be macaroni pie in the refrigerator, and you know, and it was just always such a, like, first of all, that act of cooking for people, of feeding people, that was how she expressed her love, right? She spoke some English, never quite fully got the hang of it, you know, but she was a, you know, she really expressed herself through cooking, right? Like, and you know, and I always loved that, right? And I loved that idea and that experience, and so I think started to some extent where I was trying to recreate my grandmother's macaroni pie, which was this thing where you would take like this like kind of leftover pasta, right, and you'd put it in like in a pie plate with like some, you know, just like leftovers, so like leftover vegetables, like, you know, the cheap cuts of meat from, you know, you'd be like, you know, like essentially like ham hock, you know, or shredded meat off of what was left from a piece, or, and then it was like filled with like this kind of like almost like custard of like eggs and cheese, and then it would baked, and then you would let it, you know, and then you would let it sit in the refrigerator, and you just serve it like a slice of it like pie, right? But it's just like, you know, macaroni and peas and fresh basil and Parmesan and a little bit of like, you know, chunks of meatball and pieces of pork, and just something, you know, you serve with a little sauce. And so I've always sort of been chasing that recipe. I always experiment with it and play with it. And I think that got me down the road with experimenting with food and trying to, you know, share that with other people.
That's so rad. So is there like a non-obvious aspect to kind of brewing your own goods in this regard? Like, is there something that people don't realize before getting into it that you'd like to, you know, kind of inform them, or kind of a fun aspect that they don't realize that they're missing out on by not attempting this?
Yeah, I think that people just become, first of all, like, a lot of recipes are wrong. Honestly, I've made some recipes, right? I've made Alton Brown recipes and had them be just like, nope, this is not right, you know. And basically, when you start even just cooking from recipes and you get a little more comfortable with it, you realize that you're doing things to your taste, right? And so I would just say that, like, as long as you are able to sort of stay in tune with the things that you like and the things that you respond to, and, you know, are able to sort of keep things, you know, really balanced, right? It's, you know, not just salty, right, but salty and sweet, you know, spicy and sour, fatty, right? Like all the different aspects of food. Like, the more of those things that you can get into one food experience, right, the more harmonious they become, the more, you know, that you don't taste any one of those things, but you just taste this like very full experience of food.
Yeah.
And so I think just trusting yourself and just trusting the things you like is really a pretty reliable barometer, right? Like, just, you know, and play with it, and don't be afraid to screw up. People get so discouraged when they make something and it doesn't work. You know, and it's like, it's just an opportunity to figure out something that didn't work then, right? Like, take something away from that and just keep going. I think it's just an opportunity to, like, you know, really, I find it to be incredibly as close as I come to Zen. I am not, you know, that's not me. Right. Yeah. But, like, there's something about, like, setting out, like, okay, what are the things I need? Let me get my mise en place. There's something about it that's really soothing for me. And then just in the moment, and then just not panicking and just continuing to taste stuff. and continuing to adjust, based on your experience and based on your own palate. Things will work out. You just don't really need that, and it's great. And sometimes it's great. Like you want to, I need to make this food. I want to follow a recipe. That's awesome. No, but just, being in tune with it, but with what works for you and not being so slavish to those things that you miss what makes you happy with food.
Yeah. That's so rad. So other than the idea of failure, making a recipe that you don't enjoy being a failure, is there another big misconception about kind of home creative cooking or kind of experimenting in the kitchen that you hear from other people?
Not really. Or maybe I'm just not understanding the question correctly.
No, it sounds like you understand it, but it's not really. It's kind of cool, that idea to backtrack a little bit, the idea of creating a dish so that the flavors you're not tasting each individual, but you're tasting like the whole coalition. So it's like, you don't want a compilation, you want a concoction.
Right.
Yeah.
You want alchemy, right?
Yeah.
Like you do want something that becomes this thing that is more than just the sum of its parts. And when it's done right, it really shines that way. And I think that I don't think there's anything wrong with cooking to a memory. Right.
Totally. Yeah.
Like just trying to recreate something that you love and just experimenting and playing and starting to figure out what works and doesn't work. And just be aware that some stuff's going to just be a disaster. And you don't need to put that stuff on Instagram.
Yeah.
You can throw those away.
You can throw it away. But it's a lesson learned. It's like the null rod joke, right? It's not that you haven't gained nothing. It's that you've gained, knowing that this is nothing, or paradigm of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So. Before we move on to the peeve, I'm kind of curious, if you were going to make a BDM cookbook, is there a first ballot, is there an item that pops out, or first couple items that definitely make the cookbook?
So I did start doing a YouTube show where I would do cooking and gaming.
Sweet.
A couple years back, more than a few years back, and then I moved. And I moved from a place with a gas stove to an electric stove. Mm-hmm. And I hated cooking with an electric stove so much that I didn't go back to making episodes. So I think I only made 3 or 4. I'm back in a kitchen with a gas stove, but in an awesome kitchen, right? Like with great lighting, but I just haven't had time. I would love to go back to that. There's 2 recipes that I think I would start with. One is I think my most successful sort of proliferation of something I make to other people, which is my tomato sauce. And it's this really simple tomato sauce that's like onions, garlic, and tomatoes, but I add lemon zest to the onions and garlic in a cold pan. Mm-hmm. And then oil, salt, and pepper, and then let that come up to temperature, and then I deglaze with the juice from the lemon, and then maybe a little wine if I need more, and then add my tomatoes and and then herbs and whatever else. But and that's been something that's been a very, and then I also use a little grade B maple syrup in that, because normally a tomato sauce will have a little sugar to offset some of the acidity of the tomatoes. You have a little extra acid because of the lemon in this case, and I really like maple syrup as my. It seems bizarre for someone who's half Italian to even half Italian. It seems crazy that they would say maple syrup, but this really kind of dark amber, I think they call it now. They used to call it grade B, but that was bad marketing. So dark amber, pure maple syrup, a tablespoon, maybe not even. And that to me is the perfect sauce. I made this. I was talking to Marshall Sutcliffe about the sauce once, and Marshall makes the sauce at least once a week. Like, you know, he'll always talk about BDM sauce, and he makes it. And I have other people who've picked up on it, and it's really simple. It's not like reinventing the wheel, but the lemon is just something that really makes it kind of special and really brightens it in a lot of ways. Like, where a lot of time I think tomato sauce can have that kind of dark, heavy taste. This is something that's really fresh and vibrant. So I would do that. And then the other is my Molten Pinnacle cookies, which are a double dark chocolate cookie with either dried cherries or dried oranges, depending on what you have, and like 2 tablespoons of gochujang in the batter. So they're a spicy dark chocolate cookie.
Yeah.
You can find all of those recipes on fetchland.com.
I was gonna say.
I have a website. I have a website that has a button. If you look for recipes, you'll find them. Fetchland.com.
These will be in the details down below. The YouTube and the website. Definitely going to be using some of these for next Christmas when I have the opportunity to cook. This is awesome. Yeah, nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. We've gotten the passion out of the way. Let's dive into the peeve. BDM, what is the preposterous peeve that you have brought with you today?
I thought about this, and I have a lot. So I was originally going to bring up the new packaging on Entenmann's cakes, which used to be you'd get an Entenmann's cake, and there'd be like a cellophane panel, and you could see the cake inside. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Entenmann's cakes now, it's a picture of what the cake should look like inside. They've decided to do away with that cellophane panel. It's just a cardboard box, no window, no die cutting, no plastics. Yeah. Probably better for the environment, I guess.
But who cares about that?
And also the box doesn't open the same way either, right? It used to, the old Peppercorn box used to open, it would hinge up. Like there was like a diagonal perforation at the back half of the box, and it would like kind of like hinge up. Doesn't do that anymore. It just opens like on the side panel, and you got to slide the whole thing out. Who even knows what's going to come out of it? Can't see in and check. So it could be anything. But that's not what I went with. And this is something I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but maybe it's just me, but this is something that drives me crazy. Watching a movie or a TV show, and a character's like, oh yeah, you get me a cup of coffee, right? And someone goes to the vending machine, and they fill up a cup of coffee, they put a lid on it, and then they bring the cup of coffee back to the person. But the way the person moves and the way they handle the cup of coffee tells you there's nothing inside that cup, right? They shot some coffee going in the cup in the cutaway, right? They had this, but for whatever reason, they've decided they can't be bothered giving a full cup to this actor. This actor who's so good.
He's not trustworthy.
Yeah, that they're going to make, and it drives me insane. Right? It drives me crazy because it's people move with their hands in this way that they would never move with a thing full of hot coffee. Right? And I get it, right? Like, yeah, you don't want like some, Milo Ventimiglia on This Is Us splashing himself with hot coffee and disfiguring his beautiful face, right? But put water in it. Put iced coffee in it. Yeah. Just give me some frickin' verisimilitude here. I don't understand. And it really will. My wife can't. My wife now sees it because she's like, oh God, you're gonna go off, aren't you? And it
backs away from the volcano before it erupts, just edges over to one side of the couch.
It drives me absolutely crazy, and I just don't understand it. Is it just like too much to ask that someone behave like, and it's not just like some little pet, right? It, to me, it affects the way they act. Because if this person, it breaks
the mise en scène.
Yes, if this person was in this moment holding a cup of coffee and had a reaction to something, well, that coffee's going to spill on their hand, right? Or that coffee's going to, or they've got to be careful about that coffee not spilling. There's all these like little decisions that we make when we hold a cup of coffee.
Yeah. And
the fact that they've just chosen to ignore that in so many productions drives me crazy. It's the same thing with like an empty suitcase. Right? You'll see someone like pick up a suitcase. You're like, there's nothing in that suitcase. That is.
Where are they going? Are they going there for just an afternoon?
There is nothing in that suitcase. I saw the scene where they packed the suitcase because they always show you that scene. But for some reason, when they show the person moving the suitcase around, there's nothing in that suitcase, and it just takes me out of it. So that's and my wife clearly has labeled this. I believe has used the word preposterous to describe this before. So it is almost literally a preposterous pet peeve of mine.
Awesome. When did you first notice this raising your ire? Was there a movie? Was there a time in your life? I
think it was an episode of Law and Order. I think it was an episode of Law and Order, but honestly, it's like no one thing. It's now that I've said it, you're gonna see it. You're gonna see it. You're gonna notice it.
You've opened Pandora's box. I will
Yes.
never be free of this.
Yeah, maybe this is the moment where we turn the tide on this. Right? Maybe we get some sort of like call to action by the people.
The next thing that Hollywood has to deal with.
Yes.
We want coffee in those cups.
Yeah, and you'll see. I'm telling you, it's so obvious once you think about it. I think there's an episode of Mrs. Maisel that where I see that when
sure.
and it just it just bugs me. It just gets under my skin, and it just it's because it's an opportunity for the scene to be better.
Yeah.
Right. It's an opportunity for there to be this moment of human connection, like, oh yeah, I've been so upset that I spilled coffee on myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I've been so excited.
The only time that there's coffee in the cup is when they're going to spill it on themselves.
Yeah. But then they do stuff that it would spill and it doesn't, and it's just to me like a little bit of it's like one of those things where people are like, no one will ever notice that there's no coffee in the cup.
It's a little cheat. Yeah. It is kind of interesting though, because they say acting is reacting, and so to take away yes. The liquid, you are removing that actor's ability to truly act out that scene in the most believable, realistic, human way possible.
Right. You've walked across the kitchen with a cup of coffee, right? Like, that you need to walk a little differently. Mm-hmm. You can't just like walk at full speed, right? You're like, I've got this mug full of coffee or this cup full of coffee. I've got to walk at a different pace. I've got to hold my body in a slightly more controlled way. And maybe that doesn't work for the scene the way you intended it, but that's how life works, and that's what that's going to be good acting. That's going to be a better scene. So there you go. That's it.
All right. TED Talk over, and with that we're gonna head to our second ad break, but don't go anywhere, because when we get back, BDM is going to enter the lightning round.
Ooh.
Do you ever find yourself doing a mundane activity with nothing to keep you from gouging your eyes out or sticking a pencil through one ear and out the other? Well, then perhaps I could introduce you to music. Music comes in a variety of different types, flavors, and colors. Theorists say that it's the best thing to introduce to your life since food. So go out and get some, and make your life just a little bit more bearable. And we are back. BDM, are you ready to enter the lightning round?
Lightning round?
No, not at all.
Too bad.
Oh, damn it.
All right, put however much time it takes to bake this cookie on the clock. BDM, is there a god?
No.
Shakira's voice in Danny DeVito's body, or Danny DeVito's voice in Shakira's body?
Danny DeVito's voice in Shakira's body. There's always mute.
You're having the best day of your life. What happens next? Another amazing thing or something terrible?
I'm a streaky player, so I think it's gonna be another amazing thing.
Are hot dogs sandwiches?
No, they're tacos.
Pineapple on pizza or fist fight?
Fist fight. Anyone who wants to. I'm ready. Let's go. The answer is do whatever you want, but I will fight you if you try to make me eat pineapple on pizza.
If you had the power to see the future but couldn't change it, would you use it?
I have a character that's based around this idea. I would, I'd Still exploring.
Kill the spider or get an adult?
I never kill the spider. I actually try. I put the spider outside. I guess I am the adult.
Is there a price for you to give up your passion forever?
No. And I have documented this time and time again in my career decisions.
Did you ever cheat on a test in school?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which do you max out first? Intelligence, charisma, or strength?
Intelligence.
Are we alone in the universe?
No.
Would you rather have your inner monologue sound like Gilbert Gottfried or Fran Drescher?
It sounds like Gilbert Gottfried.
Are Cheez-Its addicting?
No.
Make the food or do the dishes?
Both, generally.
Do you create your own thoughts or do you just listen to them?
I just listen to them at my best moments.
If you have to have only one for the rest of your life, which would you choose? Rice or pasta?
Pasta.
Would you put your brain in a robot body if you could?
I fully expect that this is how I will live out my waning centuries.
Would you rather have flight or invisibility?
This is not a lightning round question. This is like a podcast by itself, right? But invisibility.
Vests or opera gloves?
I'm a vest man.
Are you out of touch or is it the children that are wrong?
Oh, it's definitely the children who are wrong. 100% those kids. I would have gotten away with it too. Etc.
Have you ever buried anything in a time capsule?
Yes.
Have a bird shit in your mouth every morning, but your breath is lovely, or you have perfect dental hygiene, but your mouth always reeks?
Does correlation and causation thing happen here? Is that why? I mean, is that why my breath is so? Because if so, I mean, then I might, that might just become part of my morning routine.
Rocking chair or recliner?
Recliner.
Could you eat 37 of your favorite food for $5,000 in a 1 hour time limit?
I have proven myself wrong every time I've ever said yes to this question.
Well, congratulations.
You survived the lightning round.
Woo!
But before we move on to your prize, I, like many listeners at home, would like to know, what is your favorite food?
Oh, wow. It is, I guess it's ravioli. I guess it's cheese ravioli and tomato sauce. That's probably like my go-to comfort food.
Very respectable.
Yeah.
Now, since you have won, what lightning round question would you like to ask me and in turn be asked of future guests?
All right. Pizza burger or cheeseburger pizza?
Had both. Pizza burger, not close.
All right, I think that's the correct answer. But
Don't be baited. Cheeseburger pizza is not nearly as good as you want it to be. It is a spit in God's eye and an affront to mankind. Do not be baited.
What if it was a pineapple cheeseburger? Anyway.
All right, well, then maybe. I guess we're going to have to fight next time we meet. Otherwise, questions doesn't count. All right, as we come to a close, anything you want to plug, recommend, places people can find you or your content, or shout outs that you'd like to give to friends or family?
I'm always on Twitter at Top8Games, TOP8, the number 8 games, which is a Twitter account I have because I don't remember the password to Top 8 Magic. Which is technically also me if you ever follow that, but I just can't get into it. It might be lost at this point. You can find me in some other places. Interpopcomics.com is a place where we're doing digital comics. You can see what we're doing. Interpop.io is my website for my company. Work with some really cool people doing some amazing stuff there. Having a lot of fun. And I don't know. Everyone I would give a shout out to is super successful, so they're doing great. They don't need me.
Well, we needed you, and I appreciate you coming on. So
this was my pleasure.
Thank you,
love
BDM,
this.
for being my guest today, and a special thanks to my editor, Richard Ashford, and my composer, Joshua Gibbons. And thank you. Yes, you listening at home, wherever you found time to appreciate this. Time is the most precious commodity we have, and I appreciate you spending yours with us. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, or just share with a friend. Every little bit helps. Or if you already have and are out of episodes to listen to, don't worry, we put out a new episode every Monday at midnight on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes at Passionate People and Preposterous Beef Podcast. And a very special thanks are due to our first Patreon patron, Sabella Yellow. And if you'd like to join said illustrious ranks and have your name read aloud, just head on over to patreon.com/Passionate People and Preposterous Beef Podcast. And remember, folks, plums are dumb, apples are green. Why have wine when you don't have time? Ciao.